Hey everybody, this is Lisa Harper, and you're listening to the Not Ready Yet Curating Conversations for the Aging Journey podcast. This is the show that changes the conversations we have with our loved ones about aging and life decisions. Let's have more honest conversations where we speak the quiet parts out loud. Today, I'm welcoming Mark Wilson. He brings together two worlds that are rarely connected in dementia care: executive leadership and real life caregiving. After more than 25 years of heading the leadership and organizational effectiveness and HR strategies at Fortune 500s like PepsiCo and Taco Bell, Mark stepped away from corporate life to care for his mother during her Alzheimer's journey. That experience reshaped his understanding of what families truly need, not just support, but leadership. It also inspired him to write the book Breakthrough Alzheimer's Care. In his corporate world, he coached senior leaders on how to lead and create breakthrough results for their organizations. After his experience with his mom, he is helping others have breakthroughs on how to go from caregiving to care leading, which is a new term for most of us, and we will dive deeper into that. Nearly 1 in 4 American adults are family caregivers. That's 63 million people in our country, according to the Caregiving in USA report of 2025 that was done by the National Alliance for Caregivers and AARP. And so, I think a lot of people listening maybe don't even identify as a caregiver, but they are doing caregiving responsibilities. And so I want people to listen and hear that this mindset shift, this approach of taking caregiving to care leading, what does that equal? I hope that has our audience intrigued, Mark, because it's fascinating to me. There's so many people that this conversation is going to touch and be value to. So Mark, thanks again for being here.
I'm so excited, Lisa. Thank you for having me on your show. I'm excited to be here for so many reasons. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I always ask people, how did life bring you here to this intersection, right? And so I kind of introduced some of that in the beginning, but through your own words, could you share your journey to being here, having a book now on breakthrough Alzheimer's care?
Yeah, no, I'd love to. As you mentioned, I was an executive at Taco Bell for 20 plus years, leading leadership and training, and still relatively young, kind of in the middle of my executive career. And then my mom was showing some symptoms of dementia and Alzheimer's, and I was a little bit in denial, to be honest with you. I said, "Oh, yeah, she's okay." But my sister was a little bit more pointed. She said, "No, we got to get her tested." So we did get her tested. Sure enough, she had Alzheimer's and vascular dementia. And so her neurologist, who is at University of California, Irvine, she's written books. She's one of the nationally leading neurologists. Said, "Okay, you gotta, it's not that early a phase, so we got to kind of help her with some medications and things." And I didn't know anything about Alzheimer's, so I pulled her aside and I said, "How long does my mom have with this disease?" She says, "Well, because she has some heart issues, some other things, it's hard to say, but I'd say about 5+ years." And I thought, 5 years? She's only 72 at the time. I thought, that does not work for me. I want her to live a lot longer than that. I mean, she was an amazing mom. She took so good care of us. She was a kindergarten teacher, and oh my, I could talk for an hour about how great she was. So I thought, okay, I'm going to leave my work to take care of her at home. I don't know how I'm going to do it yet, but I'm going to figure out how to make sure she's happy and lives a lot longer than 5 years, because that doesn't work. So I did. And because I've always been training and learning and that kind of thing, I did a crash course in all the things I could do to help my mom. And I found out that there's lots of little things you can do that help. There's no cure for it, but I thought, okay, why not try? If there's some evidence that these things make a difference, why not try them? So I basically just made a list of all kinds of things, from nutrition to exercise to cognitive stimulation, art programs. I had all kinds of things that I did to help her. And after about 2 years of doing it full time myself, it's hard. It's a burnout. And so I was just not effective as a caregiver. And so I thought, I need some help. So I had some caregivers, home agency people, help me. And I hired the best people because I knew how to hire good people.
Yeah, so that's where your crossover lies, is having the knowledge in corporate and then applying it into this world. And so you did about 2 years of the solo caregiving yourself before bringing in other people. So tell us about that process, because yeah, if you were doing this for major Fortune 500s, what translated into the world of caregiving for you?
Well, a lot more than you might think. I mean, First of all, hiring great people. It's interesting. The home care agencies, they're used to just sending people. It's like, okay, I need a caregiver, and they just like send people. I said, no, 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 you're not going to send people. I'm going to interview them. find the give me the top two candidates with this kind of criteria. I said has to have some experience with Alzheimer's, has to have blah blah blah, and good caring, fun people. So they'd send me a couple people, and then I would interview them. But the other thing, part of that is I know about talent pool. The bigger your talent pool, the more likely you to find good people. So I didn't use just one agency, which is very common. I used 5 different agencies, and I said each one send me the best people. So I'd interview 7 or 8 people, and I would pick 1 or 2 that I really liked. And I had a criteria in my mind. I didn't really know it clearly in the beginning, but I learned quickly over time what was important. And safety was really important, number one. And then number two, I called it the magic factors. Things like having fun, showing great compassion, being sensitive, being very observant to kind of notice when my mom was a little bit off or whatever was going on. So those things were, I call them the magic. And so if they had the magic and they had good safety protocol, then I would give them a trial shift, and I would watch them and see how they worked and whether my mom was safe and how they interacted with her. And so I through that process, which is kind of an HR process, I found the best people on the planet. And then it's like, how do you lead them? So once you go through all this work and find these great people, one is you want to motivate them and keep them excited, and you don't want them to leave.
Yeah.
So, I mean, kind of HR 101 is retain them and motivate them. And so my retention strategy was pretty simple. Give them flexibility on schedule, because I learned that from Taco Bell. Flexible schedule is very important. So I bent over backwards to find out when they wanted to work. And if something came up, I would juggle other people to come in or I would fill in. And so I was very flexible in their schedule. And then I made them feel like gold because the agency paid them whatever they paid them, kind of competitive average pay. But I made them feel really important by both recognizing what they did. If they had a good idea, I would share it with other members of the team. And so that they knew what their ideas were important. I would celebrate their birthdays, whatever it is. Basically, they felt part of the family. I had for the last 6 years, 7 years of my mom's life, I had 5 full-time caregivers, 24/7 care, because she needed that. And these people never left after 6, 7 years. No turnover, and that's rare in this industry.
Wow. Yeah,
And
that is rare.
my sister and I are still friends with them, even though my mom passed a few years ago. We're still friends. We still meet with them. We have dinners together. We celebrate birthdays. So they are part of the family, and they felt it, and that's a key part of it. And other things like other parts of HR that applied, where there's coaching protocol. I called it in my book. I call it coaching questions. These are questions you can ask somebody to help them go from good to great. And they identify the things that'll make them even better. But I ask the questions so they can reflect on, okay, yeah, I could have done this a little bit better. If I see something that wasn't perfect, I would go through this coaching model and help them identify what they can do to get even better. So that was another kind of application. And that's the core team. And then this is another interesting area that I call it the extended care team. Your extended care team are people like doctors, physical therapists, speech therapy. We had a number of these folks come to the house, and you have to lead people, even though they're specialists, especially doctors. Doctors do not like to be led. They do not. They don't see themselves as working for you or your loved one. In fact, you work for them. But
Right.
your mindset has to be they work for you because you're the leader of the team. And in my book, I talk about ways to kind of flip that around. One way is to have a list of questions. Always have a list of questions you're going to ask the doctor. And in my book, I have a long list of questions that are appropriate for dementia and Alzheimer's patients, or just elderly in general. I used to print out the copy of the questions, hand them to the doctor, and say, okay, in this appointment, we want to go through these questions. Some doctors will take the time and go through it, and they're great. Other doctors look at me like, have you lost your mind?
Yeah.
I lead this discussion, not you.
Yeah.
It's interesting. And then there's other like crazy little tactics, like I call some doctors the speedsters. I mean, no matter what you do, they're rushing through there. If the questions don't work, I said, okay, just while your loved one is like sitting on a chair or on the table, wherever they are, you slowly walk and step in front of the door. so the doctor can't race out. I mean, you don't actually like physically block them or hit them, of course.
But the
The subliminal,
tactic of we're not done yet.
right. The subliminal message of you standing in front of the door just gives them a pause
Hmm.
for thought so they can take a little bit more time and be thoughtful about the diagnosis and the treatment. So these are kind of examples. I have lots of examples in the book about how leadership and breakthrough thinking apply to caregiving.
Yeah. Well, and you made a reference there about all caregivers, and I just want to be clear. I know your book is specific on dementia, Alzheimer's. That was your experience with your mom. For those listening that are saying, we have more of a chronic illness with Parkinson's or what have you, are tactics in the book applicable to other areas too for other caregivers?
100%. I mean,
Okay.
the idea of finding great people, treating them right, recognizing them, that's applicable in any care situation. I also talk about the importance of nutrition and those things. That's important for any health. There's a connection, as you know, the connection between brain health and body health, and those things are important. Nutrition and all that, and the therapies are important too. Physical therapy. I had my mom, somebody come to our house every single week for years and years, a physical therapist, and that kept my mom mobile. And oftentimes, elderly people, and especially people with dementia, lose their ability to walk. And if they're bedridden, we know that's not good for their happiness. They can't get out and do things. It's not good for their health because they can get pneumonia and other things from being bedridden. And so I think the lion's share of my ideas in my book apply for any caregiving situation.
Okay, good. To get people talking, to get families talking, people say, I don't want to talk about death. I don't want to talk about decline. And so I heard somebody pivot and say, well, let's talk about living through chronic disease. Let's talk about living with dementia for 15 years, right? Did you mention that it was 15 years your mom, it was a diagnosis of 5 years, and then
Yeah.
through the work you did, she was with you for 15 more years.
Yeah, no, I forgot to mention that. Yeah, it was all about, I think that all the crazy experimental things I did helped her live happier and much longer, almost three
That's
times.
amazing.
And in fact, we don't have time to go to this detail, but in fact, she may have lived even longer because at the end, she had a small procedure, and the surgeon gave her, it was not a major surgery, but he gave her the wrong surgery in the wrong body part, and it led to an infection and sepsis, and that actually killed her. So she might have lived even longer with all these things that we did together.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, it was very tough. It was the biggest mistake I ever did. I should have said no to the procedure,
Well,
and it's like you talk about good regrets. That was the biggest regret of my life, actually.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that because through all the efforts that you were taking, and then for something like that to happen, I'm sure that was just a massive blow. Oh my gosh, like after everything you did, and then that happens. I say to people, we have to learn from others' mistakes and others' ways because we're not here long enough to live through them all ourselves, right?
Mhm.
And that is what I see your book as. Did you have an idea of writing a book when you first were doing this? This was just a heart moment for you and your mom. You were just applying who you are, your skills and strengths to another situation. And at the time, did you even realize that you would have a book later after? No. Okay.
It's an interesting story. I had no idea. After my mom passed, I was kind of friends with the director of development at UC Irvine's Alzheimer's Center. And so anyway, we were talking. I said, "Oh, my mom passed," and she said, "I thought you were doing some interesting things to help her." And I kind of went through a few of those. And she said, "Oh my gosh, we have a podcast series called Spotlight on Care. You've got some really good ideas. If you don't mind, I'd love to have you go on a couple episodes and share some of these ideas." So I did. People texted me, emailed me. They came out of the woodwork and said, "You have some really amazing ideas. You should write a book."
So yeah,
Yeah, and I
right.
thought, it's
And
like, I don't know how to write a book. I've never written a book, but it was kind of in COVID times. And so I had, a little bit of free time, and I thought, okay. So one day I just took some notes, the next day some more notes, and 6 months later I had a draft of a book.
no, that's amazing. And you include some of those mistakes, right? Because it's not just the things that worked, it's also the things of, hey, look out for this is a pothole I went
Totally,
into. Don't avoid that one.
totally.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I
no,
think
it's
that's such a
that's really
gift.
important. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, it's great.
For those listening, whatever you're going through with your parent that's aging, I mean, we're all going to age at some point. I call it a gift to age because some are not given that. Some die tragically in car accidents or other scenarios that way before the time of what they probably should have left this earth. So I'm always like, if you have the gift of aging, I'd like to change that mindset of how we think of our aging loved ones. And as the sandwich generation, we've got things coming at us on all different ways, and people need things from us. We feel a responsibility. I say to caregivers, you start getting the mail, you start getting groceries, you start doing these things, and they call it the caregiving snowball because it just evolves into this thing. It's like that's just the entry point of it. And so for you to give, hey, look out for this, we can Google anything or ask AI, but we only get that fact. We don't get the context. We don't have contextual information. We don't have historical information supporting. A lot of things right now are just we have an answer, but your book is more of like how to implement and things to kind of take action right now, which I feel is missing.
I'm glad you mentioned that because, when I sat down, I thought, okay, I want to make it conversational. I want to make it comforting for people because I know how hard it is being a caregiver. I mean, it's the hardest thing I've ever done. I mean, I used to work 60, 70 hours a week as an executive. People say, well, wasn't that harder than being a caregiver? I said, no. Being a caregiver is way harder because it's 24/7. I mean, my mind was totally absorbed with it. But at the same time, I loved it. I mean, it's an interesting paradox because hardest thing I've ever done and also the most rewarding thing I've ever done because to see my mom live longer than they thought, and even even the neurologist would say, your mom, for where she is in her journey, is doing remarkably well. And I would just like glow inside when I hear that because I knew I was making a big difference. And when she would smile and laugh, she lost her speech. That was one of the first things that went. But she could still laugh and she could still smile. And to see those moments of joy it was worth it. It's
My
definitely
goodness.
worth it.
Yeah.
So in my book, I talk about a lot of things, but the mindset is really important. The first pillar of the 5 pillars I talk about is about self-care and self-energy. And how do you do that? I call it there's external sources and there are internal sources. And the internal sources are trying to reframe it, as one of them. Think about it differently. Instead of a burden and all this, it's a privilege. And it can make huge difference for your loved one. And you're going to make a difference for you too. You're going to be a better person. You're going to feel better about yourself because you made this difference. Sure, it's a sacrifice. We know love is often a sacrifice. That's just part of love. If you really love somebody, you're willing to sacrifice. And caregiving is a sacrifice, no doubt about it. But positivity and stay focused and taking care of yourself, that's hugely important because if you're not positive, there's a concept I learned called the mood elevator. If you're not high on the mood elevator and high on the accountability ladder, meaning you're accountable for things that happen and you're positive that you can make a difference, then you're going to be effective. If you're depressed and you're saying, "Oh, I don't, there's no cure, so there's nothing we can do," and you're just hanging on, like the cat, then you're not going to really be effective. So if you're going to go through this journey, you might as well do it in a positive way that helps you and helps them at the same time.
Yeah, because, if you're the caregiver to sustain your health and your well-being, it's essential to the care you're trying to give to your loved one. And there is a statistic out there, and I know it's quite high. I don't know it off the top of my head, so I won't quote a number, but that the healthy caregiver will pass a lot of times before the person they're caring for, because of that snowball. And like you were saying, if you're imploding, to what limit does that go? You said there's 5 pillars. So the first one.
The first one is like self-care and self-energy and mind is all kind of bundled together. So that's
Gotcha.
basically the first pillar. Second pillar is safety, because the idea is that if your loved one's not safe, nothing good happens. They're not happy. They're not going to live longer. They're not safe. So that to me, that's like foundational safety.
I think we think a lot about falls and safety, which is huge. We should be very aware of falls. But also something I think that you had brought up was choking and swallowing. And I don't think a lot of people think about that. And so could you just give us a brief explanation of like high level safety things that you were looking for to make sure that you had peace leaving your mom with these caregivers?
Yeah, and they were remarkable in keeping her safe. But yeah, the things you mentioned, one of them, fall risk is a big one. And so there's lots of things you can do. A walker is one example. And my mom could walk, but I felt more secure when she'd use a walker. So some people don't like to use a walker. My mom was a kindergarten teacher. So we decorated her walker with stuffed animals and fun things. So she liked it, actually. She would smile when she'd use the walker. And then there's other things like make sure the flooring in the bathroom, especially, is not hard. We put these sort of soft foam tiles the jigsaw tiles that often in kids' playrooms in the bathroom.
Okay.
There wasn't a fall, but if there was, it wouldn't be devastating. Things like that, rails. And anyway, so fall risk is one. Eating is another one, especially for dementia patients because they lose their ability to chew and swallow. So some interesting things in that area. One is I was at Walmart one day and I saw kids' utensils. First of all, they're smaller and they're rubber. So I thought, what a great idea for my mom because smaller means smaller portions and less likely to choke if the portions are smaller. And rubber because my mom would have a tendency to bite. And so she would, if you bite on a rubber utensil, it's not going to be like biting on on a silver
Yeah,
spoon.
metal. Yeah.
So metal, yeah. So those things are examples. There's other things like, a raised toilet seat so it's easier to get up. Motion sensors, another one. If you have to leave the room, you can't watch them 24/7. So if you have to step out, put a motion sensor in so that if your loved one starts to get up, you can run in there and make sure she gets up. Because transferring, getting up, getting down, moving, changing directions, that's the biggest times that somebody falls. So my book has all these different things, and they're not expensive to do in your home. And if your loved one is in a facility, make sure that the facility has all these things too and doing it right. Because if they don't, move them to another facility or manage it better with the director of the facility. I mean, whatever you do, you're the leader. You got to make things happen that are safe for your loved one.
Well, and I say there's nothing soft in the bathroom, and you just kind of made that statement not true anymore. If you put those things down. So those are great little tips.
I mean, a lot of kids, I never had kids, but I know a lot of parents, when they're for little ones, other things are good for safety too, like edge guards. You can put these soft little things easy. They just stick right on there. So if there's a fall, the edge is where you're going to, like on a piece of furniture or a tile sink, that's where you're going to get hurt. So if you put these edge guards that are rubber, we can minimize the risk. Yeah. Things like that. A lot of things like that.
Well, those are great tips. Thank you for sharing those. So we're on number 3 then.
Yeah. 3 is lead the finest care team ever. That's kind of the biggest chapter in the book, chapters where I talk about how do you select for them, how do you lead them, how do you manage both the direct caregivers and your extended team, when to fire a caregiver or when to fire a doctor. That's part of it. And so, all that's in the book, all under pillar number 3, which is lead the finest care team ever.
And just permission that you can for people to question things they're hearing. I feel like sometimes those appointments are so overwhelming. Everybody leaves going, "What just happened?"
Exactly. And even things like I led a lot of people in my job, and I didn't know as much about what they were doing as they did, but I knew enough to lead them. And so the same thing is in the medical world. You're not going to know as much as your doctor, but there's lots of resources out there, which I include in the book, where you can learn about your loved one's condition, whether it's Alzheimer's or anything else. And you need to know enough to be able to ask good questions. And you need to know enough to be able to make decisions about your loved one's care. Because if a doctor recommends something, you want to know the alternatives and trade-offs between these different things. And so a little bit of medical knowledge is important. And that's really in the book too. And then, there's lots of things around leading these experts. And the idea of firing, a doctor is like, in my book, I said, if it takes too long to get an appointment or they don't figure out the diagnosis and treatment pretty quickly, if you live in a urban or suburban area, find another doctor. There's usually lots of specialists in most of these places. Why? Because especially with dementia patients, you can't go to 5 different doctors to sort out a diagnosis and a treatment. Because it's hard to go to doctors and be mobile, and anybody that's suffering from a disease. I talk about when to hire a guru doctor, and how do you find these gurus. These are doctors that are being paid to do research on a particular topic. They speak on it, they teach on it. They're out there on a specialty topic, and you can find these people, and they see patients just like any other doctor. And I had to find a couple of these gurus for 2 conditions that my mom had that needed extra special care.
That's great information because I feel like a lot of times people don't have the wherewithal to question. And so if you're providing questions, like we don't have to come up with it. We just need to read and listen and take notes.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, that's amazing. Okay, so our fourth pillar is
Fourth pillar is nutrition and supplements and medications. It's kind of the a sort of catch-all category. And this is where it's kind of interesting because again, this is where I kind of researched and I found out that there's lots of things about nutrition that help. So I totally changed my mom's diet to where she was eating very, they call it the generic form talk about is Mediterranean diet. So a lot more vegetables, a lot more fruits, a lot, leaner meats. And so in the spirit of not choking too, I would always like, kind of mince the chicken. I would put it in soup, those things. So nutrition is really important. The other thing is there's lots of supplements out there. I know the doctors don't really believe in them because they're not sort of FDA approved, but there's lots of supplements that offer some evidence that they help with dementia and, older folks and stuff. Because there's a connection between your brain health and your body health. And even though your loved one may not have dementia, for listeners, but if their body health is good from these supplements and good nutrition, then they're going to live longer and happier. I try. My mom was such a good sport. We always got along really. We were very close. She would trust me. I would give her all these different things, and I would always mix them in like soups or puddings or something that makes it swallowable. I think it helped her. It was part of the formula. One of the,
yeah,
some of the many things that helped. But it's so funny because what helped the most? I don't really know, and it doesn't
yeah,
really matter because collectively, it made a huge difference for health and happiness. And I thought, okay, why not try it? If it doesn't, I give her like little bits of things to make sure she had no side effects. That's important. And if she, and you have to use your knowledge of your loved one too. For example, my mom was pretty, a lot of dementia patients get very agitated and angry. And that makes it difficult for them to relax and go places and have fun out. And so my mom was pretty calm, but once in a while she had this little part that was a little bit agitated. And I thought, let me look into like an anti-anxiety medication that would help her. And I talked to our neurologist, who was quite good, and she said, Celexa is a good one because it doesn't impact the brain negatively. Some antidepressants and anxiety drugs send you backwards from a dementia standpoint, so you don't want those. But this one doesn't. But it also can make you sleepy. I didn't want my mom to be too sleepy or comatose. She said she put her on the very minimal dose, and I actually started her on half of the minimal dose. This is where you have to kind of, you're the leader. Doctor said this, but I tried a half of a minimal dose, and it just made enough of a difference where it took the edge off her agitation and didn't make her sleepy at all. So it worked beautifully, and she stayed on that half of the minimum dose the rest of her life, and it was fine.
I know sundowning, the
Right.
agitation, and I always think of our energy in the morning when we wake up after rest and our brains restored. I always think of everything kind of defragging and going back to where it's supposed to. And so my understanding of the brain with dementia is that you start out with that certain amount of energy, but then every decision you make and everything you have to do, it's just taking so much energy that by noon you might have a different person than woke up.
Right. And so you kind of have to experiment a little bit. I would try little bits of these supplements, and then if she was okay with them, and I did a lot of blood, we did blood tests pretty regularly for that reason. I didn't want it to have any unknown negative effect, and they didn't. And so, yeah, it worked beautifully. So yeah, so pillar number four is a combination of medicines. I talk about some of the prescription things my mom were on, and what that's about, and some prescriptions like sleeping pills and anti-anxiety, you need to be aware not to be on those because yeah, they do help with agitation. They help you sleep because sundowners and at night, but they also slow down the brain and that's not good necessarily if you have dementia. So
Yeah.
I talk a lot about medications and supplements in pillar four. So
Okay. Okay. And
yeah.
then pillar five, I think, is an interesting title, so we're going to need some explanation on it. The surround sound.
Yeah, Pillar Five was kind of a fun one. It's an interesting background because one of the projects I had at Taco Bell was I worked with a senior person in marketing, and I was a senior HR person, and the president gave us 15 restaurants in Tucson, Arizona, that we were like our playground. Basically, he said you can do anything you want. The idea is this is a pilot experiment in both the marketing and the people side, and it was fun because his name was Martin Hennessy. He was great, and we had fun together, and we basically did all kinds of crazy things. But one of the things we did was early on we brought in a consultant who was an expert on the customer experience, and he kind of seeded in a concept in my mind called touch points. So the idea was if a customer came in, whatever they saw, they smelled, they experienced, they felt from the moment they're thinking about a Taco Bell to in the restaurant or drive through whatever, and then out, and what do they feel like afterwards, is everything to do with how happy they are with the experience, the taste, of course. Anyway, so I kind of borrowed that concept, and I thought, okay, my mom is in a similar situation. Everything that touches her, whether it's an experiential experience, whether it's the environment or people that touch her, will either make her safer or less safe, or make her happier or less happy,
Okay.
fulfilled, less fulfilled. And I
Yeah.
thought, okay, so because of that, I'm in my leadership role, care leadership role, I'm in charge of her experience and all the touch points she's going to have. So safety we talked about already. Those are important touch points. Every moment there's a chance to be safer or less safe. So I managed that. And then the experience part was a combination of the environment. And again, I mentioned my mom was a kindergarten teacher, so we made it. Everything had to be fun and positive. So we had stuffed animals. She loved to draw, which I think helped her brain quite a bit. And so we put these, like you would with a kindergarten, you put their drawings up around the house to show them that we like them and we're proud of them. And she would look at her drawings and she would smile because she knew they were good, and she knew that we were proud of her. And other things, the colors, we put the safety things in there, like some small bed rails and things, but we didn't change the fun, the comfort, the love of the physical environment around her. So that's really a surround sound idea. But then the
Okay.
other part of surround sound are the people, because my idea was anybody who had any contact with my mom, starting with the direct caregivers, but physical therapists, doctors, had to not only be technically competent in their craft, that's important, of course, but they also had to make my mom feel good. And that meant they had to be positive, they had to be fun, they had to be loving, sensitive. And anybody that touched her had to be part of this positive surround sound experience that I was after with her care. It's pretty doable if you're just careful about who you bring in. Even, and her friends, of course, would come visit her sometimes, and they were very positive and they knew what I was trying to do. So they were very loving and caring. And then, of course, the physical therapist, speech therapy, all the folks that came in, the haircutters, and I had a home dentist. I mean, the other thing is interesting is if your loved one is at home, and I get why some people can't do that, but if your loved one is at home, you can get any service, medical or other service at home that you can get in a facility. And I didn't know that at the time, but I kind of figured that out. It's safer, the person's going to know your loved one better. And so that's another thing to keep in mind. That some people say, "Well, I can't do this at home because the resources are in a facility." Not true. You can get anything at home, and for the medical parts of those, like a foot doctor or physical therapy. You can even get a dentist to come to the house, which I found, and she was amazing because my mom somehow was agitated every time she went to the dentist. I said, "Let me try to find somebody to come to the house." And this woman, Kim, she was remarkably good with my mom because she was experienced with elderly people. And doctors could even come. So yeah, all that is a part of the surround sound idea number six, and I found it remarkably helpful because my mom was happy because she
Yeah.
was surrounded by a loving environment, a fun environment, whether it's people or physical, and that was part of the formula of keeping her happy and healthy.
I think you mentioned moments of joy. You were looking for every moment of joy that could be given to your mom through anybody that was in contact with her at any moment for any reason.
Mhm.
And the whole thing was that they either left her the same or better
Yes.
once they had their moment. So I just think that, to be in touch with that, to be aware and capable to see that energy exchange and happening with your mom. I hope you're inspiring, some caregivers to now call themselves care leaders, first of all, to change this, concept. And because the caregiver, it implies the giving, the depletion of something, the using of resources for something. The care leader is like coming in saying, this is what we're going to do. And, to establish that, right? To have those thoughts ahead of time, knowing what you will and will not accept.
Yeah, completely. I mean, I talk about this in the book, sort of the elements of great leadership and then applying them to care. One of them is accountability. I mean, you need to, in your mind, say, I'm accountability for all aspects of my loved one's care. And it feels like a burden, but actually it's uplifting because you know you can make a big difference. And if you have a game plan and a concept in your mind, it's really not that difficult. And it is very rewarding because if not, if you're just kind of watching other people do whatever they want to do, then you're kind of a victim, and you don't want to be a victim, and you don't want your loved one to be a victim. And so this mindset of being the accountable leader is really important, and it's a lot more doable than you think. And you don't have to be a leadership development person like I was to do it. It just if you just have some good sense and a little bit of feeling of wanting to make a big difference, then that's plenty. You can do it with just that.
We talk about dignity a lot in the senior space and, quality of life. We have lifespan and then we have health span, like, how long do we live, but then what's the quality within those years? And so I feel like you're really focusing on that dignity and seeing the person. So to just be able to approach things like that, you're not approaching the diagnosis, we're approaching the human and applying it to how do I make sure my mom still has the best life that she has left to live? So for this shift to occur, we have to have these conversations. The podcast is called Not Ready Yet, and it's for adult kids. A lot of times we hear that from our parents. They may be saying, where do I even start? Like, I don't even think my parent thinks I'm a caregiver. What would you say to somebody that when they're going to engage their loved one, they're hearing, well, we're not ready yet to have that conversation? Is there some guidance you could give?
That's a great question. I mean, I think you just do it. I mean, it's a little bit like, okay, if you've observed that your loved one needs something, just fill the gap. I mean, they may not love it. The other thing too I talk about in the book is obstacles to this, obstacles to being a care leader. One of them is, I call it resentment. Sometimes some parents are not perfect. I mean, my mom was perfect. I can't even imagine a better mom. But some are, there might be some resentment. But the idea is that if you love your parent and they need you, this is the hardest moment that they've ever been through, especially if they have some kind of disease, cancer, dementia, whatever it might be. And you need to step up and be there for them. And even though it's hard and there is that resentment there, if it's really a deep resentment, go see a therapist. I mean, I saw a therapist not because there's any resentment, but because just to keep me strong and focused, I would go see someone once a week for 45 minutes, it helped me reframe things, it helped me stay positive. And especially if there's any resentment, then go see a therapist. But you have to kind of just step in and sort of be the leader and do it, with grace and ease. If there's some resistance, from your parent, they need you now, whether they know it or like it, they need you, and you need to, kind of be there for them. But that's the reason I wrote the book, and the reason why I do a lot of support group facilitation now. I do fundraising. It's all about hope. I mean, that's the reason why I wrote the book. People said, why did you write the book fundamentally? And I wanted to give people hope because there's no cure for Alzheimer's. It's easy to get in the quagmire of, oh, I don't know what to do. I'm a victim. They're a victim. Why is this happening to me? And those are all normal, natural feelings, but there's hope. You can make a huge difference in your loved one, which will make a huge difference in your heart, and it's worth it.
Yeah.
It's worth it. That's why even with my book, it's so funny because people ask me, how did you come up with this wild book cover? And my publisher called me and she says, what are you thinking about with a book cover? And I said, I'm not sure, but I want it to be positive because I know with these support groups, people come in devastated and hopeless and crying. And so I wanted to things like, birds and butterflies and flowers. And, some people really lean on their faith in doing caregiving. So I wanted a praying hands and the water. And so that was kind of my goal in the cover even because I wanted to give people positivity and hope, which is the strength that you need to be a good care leader. And
Yeah.
it's about mindset. It's about, kind of getting in touch with who you are and what you can be so that you can be the best person you can be for your loved ones.
Yeah, and I always think about the future you. And for adult kids, again, out there that your parents are still with you, to think of that as a gift and to think about, we all know we're not going to be here for forever. And so on the other side of that, to not have that regret or I wish I would have said, or I wish I would have done this differently. Like go with your heart and go, where you feel like you're not going to have those moments in the future. And wherever that leads you is probably going to be a good place for your family too. So it's hard. It's not, there's no easy button on this. And I appreciate you bringing this conversation. I know you do advocacy, correct? And
Yeah. In fact, in 3 weeks, I'm going back there for a presentation to Congress to get funding. And so, yeah, these are like little things that are all part of who I am now. My boss was so funny because I'm still pretty young. After my mom passed, he said, well, you want to come back to work? You can still work. I said, no, I got new work now. My new work is to volunteer and help people who are struggling with this disease.
well, thank you
He looked,
for
he looked
doing
at me like,
that.
he looked at me, are you sure? I said, yeah, I couldn't be more sure.
I mean, that's amazing. And that's why I think your story is going to resonate with a lot of people because the passion and the commitment, not only to what you did with your mom, but now to give it back and to try to change, for all of us, I think that's amazing. So thank you for doing that work too.
Thank you, Lisa.
Because we need voices. We need voices. Yeah. So I want people to know how to find you. We'll have information in the show notes too, but what do you want them to know if they're sitting at a red light or sitting on a train? What can they write down right now and how to find you?
Well, I think the best way is my website. I just had it up recently. It's called boldcareleader.com. Check out my website. I've got more information about my book, The Pillars. If you sign up for my website, I'll send you some free resources with things like the doctor checklist, the
Okay.
interview questions to interview caregivers, and some other resources like that, which are all in my book as well. And also, I'm available to speak. I mean, I know with my corporate background, there may be folks like memory care facilities or home agencies that might benefit, from my perspective as I meld caregiving with my leadership development and corporate background, and family support centers to kind of reinforce families that are dealing with dementia. Yeah, so I'm available to speak as well. But it's
Well,
all,
and I
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that crossover too with those that are still in the workforce and they're not able to step away. I could see that being of great value and giving people, like you said, peace and hope, right? Like, we need to be able to find that to be able to move forward, I think, some days. So, is there anything else that you want to make sure that our audience knows before we wrap up today?
I would just say, be positive if you're a care leader, a caregiver, and be optimistic. There are things you can do that make a big difference, and know that you can do it and just try. I learned all this on the job. I would just like, each day was a new venture. I'd try something, it would work or it wouldn't work. If it didn't work, I changed it, tried something else. And if most of your listeners, they probably wouldn't even listen here to your podcast if they weren't caring about learning. So if you can learn, and my book is one of the places you can learn, you're going to be a care leader if you've got that mindset and the willingness to learn and try things, and you can do it. And it makes a huge difference for your loved one, whether it seems like it does. Oftentimes with dementia, you're not going to get your loved one to say, I really appreciate what you're doing. You might, but if you don't, know that they appreciate you. I mean, I knew, even my mom couldn't talk, I knew she loved how I was helping her and staying connected with her. And it was remarkable. And the other thing you mentioned, Lisa, which I'd leave people with, is be grateful for these moments of joy, moments of holiness with your loved one, because they're not going to last forever, and you don't want to regret. I mean, don't have regrets, but many people do, and I know that because I know people that have had regrets that say they didn't do this with a loved one or they should have. You don't want that. I mean, and it takes a little extra effort, but you'll be glad you did in the long run.
Yeah. And that's why in the beginning I say these quiet thoughts that we have. I'm hoping that the podcast helps people bring words, like get words out and just start these conversations. They're sometimes years long conversations. They're not the kind of yes, no answers. But if your loved one knows you're thinking about it in that way, even if in the beginning they're not quite comfortable, I say it's like the glass in the sea. It's eventually going to get those soft edges, and the hope is that those conversations can come to light and that we build more relationships than hurt them in these years, but we can find information and just start talking, and conversation to me is where it all begins. So, well, Mark, I have a lightning round where I call it ready or not. Would you be interested? There's no overthinking. It's just a couple
Yeah, I would
questions.
love that. That sounds fun. I like it. That
Great.
sounds.
So, on a house, do you prefer a front porch or a back deck?
I'm probably a back deck person. It's so funny because in my house I have a hammock in the back. I don't use it as much as I like, but it's there was to know that okay, if I want to go kind of hang out in the back, I can sit on this hammock.
Yeah. The second question is, what's a phrase or piece of industry jargon that people outside of your field wouldn't understand? And what does it mean?
It's like, no, it's a good question. Let's see, a phrase that people don't understand. I don't know. Other kind of terms. One of the things I don't know if I share this with you, but one of the things I do for Alzheimer's Association is I'm a leader of a bunch of high school kids, and I don't know anything about high schoolers, but I do know about coaching and mentoring, and so they asked me to do this. So I have a bunch of high schoolers that are captains of these teams, and their goal is to fundraise and educate the community, and so I'm their mentor. And every time I meet with them, they come up with some term, talking about a term that I have no idea what they're talking about because it's high school speak.
Yeah, it's
So I
another
look,
language.
yeah, like one I learned the other day was Kahoot. I thought it was like coots are like you kind of come together, but a Kahoot, I guess, is an electronic quiz, which is something I learned.
The last question is one thing at 55. If every listener did just one thing at age 55 to make life easier at 75, what would it be?
To me, it's completely it's diet. I mean, there's no doubt if you eat healthy, you're going to do a lot better with your brain, your physical health, your emotional health. And I learned that late, past 55, but with my mom's care, I figured that out. And I'm eating a lot better and I'm just feeling better. And I think
Yeah.
that's the one thing.
Well, I love how these small decisions, they're going to shape our experience and our chapters later in life. So I appreciate you being here, Mark. We will have the resources, the list in the show notes. Thank you for making us think differently about a caregiver becoming a care leader. And with your book and your guidance, that's the how-to guide to become the care leader. So I really appreciate that. I think you're going to affect in a wonderful way a lot of families going through some hard things right now. So I just thank you for sharing it with our audience and wish you the best of luck in all things. So thank you for bringing this book to us, creating it as this practical guide of how to implement, because we just don't know what to do. And so if we can get somebody can help us solve that, then that's wonderful. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Lisa. I love talking to you. I love being part of your listening community. And so reach out to me through my website if you guys have any questions or information you need. My email is on my website. You can ask me questions. I'm happy to help any way I can.
Yeah. Well, thank you for empowering our listeners.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for joining me on Not Ready Yet, Curating Conversations for the Aging Journey. If something in this episode gave you clarity or the courage to start an important conversation, or offered a new way to look at things, I hope you'll share it with someone who might need the same encouragement. Remember, navigating aging isn't something we have to do alone or in crisis. With love, logic, and the right tools, we can face what's next with confidence and connection. Be sure to follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you're feeling generous, leave a review. It helps others find the show. And just a quick note, the information shared on this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute for medical, psychiatric, legal, or other professional advice. Always consult a qualified professional for guidance tailored to your unique situation. This is Lisa Harper, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.